Notre Dame is set to take on the Georgia Bulldogs for a spot in the CFP semifinals, and this is by far their best chance to knock off one of the elite teams in college football and change the perception of this program for good. This is Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And happy Friday, everybody. Today is Friday, December 27th, and thanks for making this your first listen before you get your weekend started. While you're here, please take a second to subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, I am so excited about today's show because we get to preview one of, if not the biggest college football game of the season so far. New Year's Day is going to be an incredible day of college football. You got Texas, Arizona State at 1 p.m. Eastern, then Oregon, Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and we'll cap it off with Notre Dame taking on the Georgia Bulldogs in prime time. Everyone who likes college football, everyone who likes sports is going to be tuned in for this one, and I cannot wait. Both teams expected to be here, but for Notre Dame, they could change the perception of their entire program if they're able to knock off the Bulldogs. And today, we're going to break down the matchup in all three phases of the game. I'm going to share my keys to victory for the Irish, plus my predictions at the end. Let's start with everything you need to know about the matchup. So, late kickoff for this year's Sugar Bowl, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 7:45 p.m. local time on New Year's Day inside the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. The game will air on ESPN, and it's actually going to feature the same broadcast crew as the Indiana game, with Sean McDonough on play-by-play, Greg McElroy as the color commentator, and Molly McGrath on the sidelines. This is the fourth matchup all-time between the two schools and the third in the past 7 seasons. It's also the second time in the Sugar Bowl, because this is the Sugar Bowl, even though it is also the college football playoff quarterfinal. The first time these two teams squared off was in 1981. Georgia won 17-10 in the Sugar Bowl to clinch the national championship. A true freshman by the name of Herschel Walker was the game MVP. They didn't play again until 2017. Georgia won that game 20-19. That was at Notre Dame Stadium. You might remember the Sea of Red and all that stuff. That was my senior year, and just a terribly disappointing loss. But I remember walking out of that game thinking, neither one of these teams are very good. Then Georgia ended up being the national championship runner-up, and Notre Dame was actually a very good team that season. 2019, Georgia won that game 23-17, but Notre Dame was a 17.5-point underdog going into that game on the road in Athens, and they had a chance to win it on the last drive. So every time these two teams have faced off, it's been a really close game, but ultimately Georgia ended up winning the contest. Georgia has the best active coach in college football, Kirby Smart. Once Nick Saban officially retired, Kirby Smart kind of took the throne of the best coach in college football at the time. He's also the winner of 2 national championships, won back-to-back, 2021 and 2022. He has a 105-18 record in 9 seasons at the helm for Georgia, and 6 of those 18 losses came against Alabama. So he's pretty much dominated the competition ever since he took over, and he got the program built in his image. And the last time that we saw this Georgia team play, they were celebrating a win in the SEC championship over Texas. They finished 10-2 in the regular season, 11-2 when you add the SEC championship game. And it is the first time that Georgia has lost more than 1 game in a single season since 2020. I'm not just talking about regular season. I'm talking about the entire season, postseason. Everything is included. They have not lost 2 games or more since 2020, but they've already done that this year. The spread in this one right now, Georgia is favored by 1.5, according to our good friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the over-under is 44.5. Vegas projects a very low-scoring game, something like 23-21 Georgia, which is also like every other time these two teams have faced off against each other, so it's not a big surprise there. So what's at stake? Well, for Notre Dame, this is their best chance to assert itself as one of the best programs in college football. Personally, I am ecstatic about this opportunity, because in order to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And Georgia has been the best there is in college football the last several years. They won back-to-back championships. They're in the mix every single year. They're at the top of the recruiting classes. They have one of the best coaches. Like, They are the top of college football these days. And even though Alabama, there's some other teams up there as well, Georgia has stayed strong up there for a really long time now. And this is going to be an incredible challenge for Notre Dame because, like I said, Georgia is loaded with talent. They have a great staff. They have every resource you could possibly imagine. But this Georgia team is vulnerable. They did lose to Alabama, who finished with 3 losses this season. And in the first half of that game, it looked like it was going to get ugly. Alabama went out to a huge lead, but then credit to Georgia, they fought back in the second half, actually regained the lead, but then ultimately Alabama won that game. Ole Miss was able to control this Georgia team on their way to a 28-10 victory. Hell, even 2-10 UMass was able to score 21 points on Georgia. I'm not going to say it was like ever a real game, but I mean, Georgia was up 31-21 in the third quarter, and the fact that UMass was even somewhat threatening is a bit of a surprise. And then you have Georgia Tech, who took Georgia to 8 overtimes. 8 overtimes. And I've seen some people throw this around as a common opponent. It's not honestly fair to Georgia because Haynes King did not play against Notre Dame. He did against Georgia. It was a huge factor in that game. But still, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets took them down to the wire and then some in that game, but ultimately Georgia was able to win that one in their last game of the regular season. And Georgia's going to be playing without their starting quarterback in this one. They're going to have to start the backup, Gunnar Stockton, because Carson Beck suffered an elbow injury in the SEC championship against Texas on the very last play of the first half. He was chucking up a Hail Mary, messed up his elbow. I believe he tore his UCL and had surgery earlier this week. So this Georgia team is different than the Georgia team of like 2021 or 2022, where they simply dominated every single person or every single team in their path. But that being said, it's still Georgia, and Notre Dame is going to have to play their absolute best to beat this team. Georgia has had some time off to get healthy. Since winning that SEC championship, they had a brutal schedule this season. And the first thing that Kirby Smart mentioned after they won the SEC championship was that he relished the opportunity to get some rest. He even called out Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, while he was like 3 feet away from him on the podium because he basically blamed Sankey for sending his team on the road and a bunch of stuff this season. I don't know. I just thought that moment personally was hilarious, and they are going to be chomping at the bit to get on the field again. And in years past, let's be honest, Notre Dame's best still might not be good enough to beat Georgia, but I don't think that's the case this year. For years, we have talked about how Notre Dame can close the gap that has existed between them and the top programs like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, or even Clemson at their peak. And they have come close to beating Georgia, and they've come close to beating Ohio State in the regular season, but they have never even come close to beating one of these teams in the postseason. Marcus Freeman and his staff have worked tirelessly to build a roster that can not only compete at that level, but win at that level. And they've been doing that ever since he was hired to be the head coach 3 years ago. And now they have a chance to change it all. A win against Georgia would send a message to everyone in the sports world that Notre Dame has arrived under Marcus Freeman and they have what it takes to reach the mountaintop of this sport. All right, now let's dig into the scouting report. This is going to be an absolute slugfest between two great defenses, but ultimately, I think the play of Riley Leonard is going to determine the outcome of this game. That's next. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, the first matchup I want to look at here is the Notre Dame offense going up against the Georgia defense. And if Notre Dame is going to win this game, Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard is going to have to play exceptionally well because this is the best defense he's faced all season long. Glenn Schumann and Javaris Robinson run the show as co-defensive coordinators, and when this group plays to their full potential like they did against Texas in the regular season, they look like the best unit in all of college football, but they haven't been as dominant as other Georgia defenses in recent memory. Let's look at it by the numbers here. So Georgia's allowing 20.4 points per game and 5.1 yards per play. That's 21st and 37th in the country, respectively. Now, part of this has to do with the quality of competition they've played. They have faced one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. So it's like the opposite of Indiana when we were breaking down all of their numbers, and you just were like, is this real? Is it fake? And I think some of it was certainly a byproduct of their incredibly weak schedule, but then we saw that Indiana defense play, and you're like, okay, these guys are legit. The offense, not so much. But Georgia is only allowing 3.7 yards per rush, which is just outside the top 30 in the country, but they have given up more explosive run plays than they have in years past. They've allowed 15 runs of 20 or more yards this season, so they are gettable if you're able to get to the outside. And their secondary, let's be honest, has looked a little bit mediocre at times. They're 50th in yards per completion allowed, and teams are averaging 208 pass yards per game against them. They have also allowed 17 receptions of 30 or more yards, so Notre Dame is going to have their chances to beat them deep. They don't really have a Jalen Carter type of defensive tackle in the middle that disrupts everything that you're trying to do, but this is still an excellent front. Number 13, Mikael Williams is an absolute stud on the edge. He's 6'5", 265 pounds, incredibly long and athletic. He made a couple plays in that Clemson game at the beginning of the season where I was like, is this the best player in college football? Now, he ended up getting hurt in that game. I think he's dealt with some other injury stuff this year, but he is a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal football player. 5 sacks on the season, 2 forced fumbles, 26 total pressures. He is a future first-round NFL draft pick. They also have number 32, Chaz Chambliss. He's a game wrecker on the edge. He's tied with Jalen Walker with 6.5 sacks in the year. He has 25 run stops, according to Pro Football Focus, and he is just everywhere around the ball. Number 11, another guy you absolutely need to keep an eye out for. He's linebacker Jalen Walker. He's another future NFL first rounder. He's tied for the team lead with 6.5 sacks, 29 total pressures this season, according to PFF. He had 3 sacks against Texas in the regular season. He was unblockable in that game, and Texas's offense just had nothing doing in that game going up against this Georgia front. Now, they made some adjustments, and it was a little bit better in that SEC championship, but still, Quinn Ewers was not ever able to get into a rhythm in this game. Walker has 58 total tackles on the year. He is a phenomenal football player. And then in the secondary, number 24, Malachi Starks is their best player back there. He's one of the best in all of college football. Thorpe Award finalist, 73 total tackles this year, an interception. And he also has 6 interceptions in his career. I think his first ever college football game was against Oregon in the season opener a couple years ago. That was Dan Lanning's first game at Oregon. Malachi Starks made one of the most impressive interceptions I've ever seen. And he's only gotten better since that time. He's a junior now, probably going to go to the NFL after this season. He has given up a couple touchdowns this season in coverage, and teams have completed 33 passes on 50 attempts when throwing his way, but still, don't get it twisted. He's a very good football player. Another guy to keep an eye out for on the back end of that defense, number 4, KJ Bolden. He's a true freshman. He was the number 1 safety and number 13 player overall in the 2024 recruiting class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. And he has made a big impact in his first season with the Bulldogs. 54 total tackles, a sack, and a forced fumble. So even though the numbers statistically don't say that this is an all-time great Georgia defense, they're still loaded with playmakers. And when you're playing a defense as talented as this one, it's going to come down to the quarterback and his ability to make plays. So my first key for the Notre Dame offense, Riley Leonard has got to let it rip. I'm talking about passing. I'm talking about running, because Georgia's biggest weakness so far this year on defense has been running quarterbacks. They've been very vulnerable at times. Alabama's Jalen Milroe ran for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win for the Crimson Tide. Jackson Dart finished with 50 rushing yards when Ole Miss knocked off Georgia this year. And Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King ran for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns in the 8 overtime loss. I honestly thought Riley Leonard would run more against Indiana, but he didn't have to, and that's a good thing, because he's going to have to run a lot against Georgia, and he's probably going to take some licks while doing so. Georgia has been stout against the run as a whole, and they're going to try to force Notre Dame to throw the ball. And Leonard has improved so much as a passer, but he's going to face a different kind of test this week. He's going to be asked to run it. He's going to be asked to throw it. And I think it's going to be very similar to the game plan that they had against Texas A&M at the start of the season, because that is the most comparable defense to Georgia's. I thought that Leonard's throw to Jordan Faison in the IU game was his best pass of the season. Climbed the pocket, got hit from his right side, still delivered a strike to Faison down the middle of the field on the post route. Beautiful ball, hit him in stride. Should have been a touchdown, but ultimately Faison was 1 yard short. And Notre Dame didn't throw the ball downfield a ton against IU. Again, he didn't have to. The conditions were not great, but he was very solid in the intermediate game, and they're not going to have to worry about the weather in this one because it's in a dome. He needs to be on time and on target, and he's going to have to fit the ball in some tight windows and big spots against Georgia. But if he's able to do that, then they're going to be able to put up some points. All right, my second key for the Notre Dame offense, Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, has got to help out his offensive line and scheme up some quick plays and get his athletes in space like he did against Texas A&M, because I am sure that the Georgia defense is looking at Anthony Knapp and they're licking their chops. And Anthony Knapp has been good for the Irish this season, but he's still a true freshman left tackle going up against this Georgia front. And Anthony Knapp had his 3 worst games in pass protection this year against the 3 best defenses they face. So they're going to try to pressure him early and often in this one. And the rest of Notre Dame's offensive line has been really solid, although we're still waiting to hear about Rocco Spindler's status for this game. He exited the IU game in the first half with an injury. Haven't really heard much about that. I heard it might be concussion, so maybe he'll be able to go in this one, but maybe Sam Pendleton is out there. And the offensive line did take a step back when Pendleton came in the game against IU. We'll see what happens against Georgia, but this Georgia defense is going to try to pressure the quarterback, and Mike Denbrock can help out his unit by calling some short, quick plays to get the ball out and don't give time for Georgia to get in the backfield. And look, Denbrock can be a little stubborn. It happens. We saw it against Northern Illinois. We saw it when Notre Dame was at the goal line against Army and they kept running the ball up the middle. He cannot afford to be stubborn against Georgia. Do not continue to run it into a wall if it's not there. Give the ball to Jeremiah Love. Give the ball to Jadarian Price. Give the ball to Jordan Faison out in space on the outside and let them cook. All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. Take a look at Georgia's offense going up against Notre Dame's defense. And Notre Dame's depth on defense is going to be tested even more now that star defensive tackle Riley Mills is out for the season with a knee injury. It is a huge blow to this defense. Riley Mills leads the team in sacks, and Mills is the 4th starter on defense to suffer a season-ending injury. He joins Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore, Benjamin Morrison, and now Riley Mills. Georgia is dealing with injuries too, though. Starting quarterback Carson Beck is out for the season after he suffered that elbow injury against Texas, underwent surgery this week. So I don't really think you can use injuries as an excuse in this game. It is going to come down to who is more physical. Notre Dame's depleted defensive line or Georgia's offensive line, who is healthier than they've been in a really long time, but they have been dealing with some attrition this season. So Mike Bobo has been the offensive coordinator for Georgia since Todd Monken left to become the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, and Georgia's offense has been pretty average this season with Bobo and Beck leading the charge. They're averaged 33.2 points per game, but they struggled against the better opponents on their schedule. They have 6.1 yards per play. That's 44th in the country. They are 81st in yards per completion. So they don't really push the ball vertically a ton. And Beck was responsible for 12 interceptions, which was his biggest issue. He was turning the ball over a lot this year. Now, sometimes he was under pressure, but it was very uncharacteristic of a Georgia quarterback to turn the ball over that much. But despite all those turnovers and all those bad games that Beck had this season, Kirby Smart never opted to go with Stockton, which might tell you a little bit about how much he trusts Stockton compared to Beck. But ultimately, Georgia struggles running the ball are another big reason why this offensive unit never took off. They're 80th in the country in yards per rush. They've allowed 58 tackles for loss, and they only had 9 runs of 20 or more yards. That's 113th in the country. They've had to deal with a lot of moving and shaking on the offensive line because so many guys have been hurt, but they figure to be the healthiest they have been all season long when they take on Notre Dame following a 3+ week layoff. So the quarterback has struggled at times. The running backs have not always been able to get it going. But honestly, the Georgia wide receivers are a huge question mark on this offense. Number 1, Arian Smith. He's their leading wide receiver with 750 yards on 47 catches and 5 touchdowns. He is an explosive athlete, but he also leads the team with 10 drops this season. 10. As a team, they have 30 drops this year. That is the worst number in the entire country. And Smith is talented. But really, you look at this group, there's not that many guys that can scare you, especially going up against a Notre Dame secondary, which has been one of, if not the best in all of college football this season. So let's bring it back to the quarterback here. Gunnar Stockton is a complete wild card for this offense. And if the wide receivers don't help him out, he's going to be under even more pressure. Now, he came in for the second half of that SEC championship against Texas, and he provided a spark. They were down 6-3 at half. Stockton came in the game, and he led them down a 10-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to retake the lead, and he came out hot. He completed four of his first 5 passes, but then after that, Texas's defense kind of figured him out. And Georgia only gained 15 yards on his next 13 dropbacks, according to Jamie Uyeyama of Irish Sports Daily. He's only had 62 dropbacks in his short career with the Dogs, and he is a dynamic runner. He was a highly ranked quarterback coming out of high school, 7th ranked QB in the class of 2022. But still, there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to Gunnar Stockton, and they're going to lean on their running backs a little bit more to set the tone and challenge the Irish defense without Riley Mills. They still have some good players on that unit, like number 3, Nate Frazier, running back, true freshman. He is the team's leading rusher, has 634 rush yards on the year, is averaging 4.9 yards per carry, has 8 TDs. Number 1, Trevor Etienne is more of a household name, partially because of his older brother, but he's another talented running back, transferred over from Florida before this season. He's been banged up a lot this year, but he still averages 5.1 yards per carry. He has 9 touchdowns on the season, and he ran for over 700 yards in the last 2 seasons when he was with the Gators. So now you have talented running backs, and they have a more experienced offensive line in front of them. But like I said, there's been a lot of mixing and matching this year, but both of their guards are multi-year starters, and they earned all SEC honors. Right guard Tate Ratledge was first team all SEC, and Fairchild was second team all SEC at left guard. And honestly, this offense goes as far as the offensive line goes for the most part. They struggled mightily against Alabama and Ole Miss. They lost those games. But they handled Tennessee and Texas, and they won those games. It's hard to predict which offensive line is going to show up against Notre Dame, but they're going to try and test Notre Dame's depleted defensive line early. So that leads me to my keys for the Notre Dame defense. You can't make up for the loss of Riley Mills with one player. It's going to be on Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, to get creative with pressures and confuse Stockton as much as possible. They got to get in his head, especially early. And I've seen some Georgia fans say that Stockton's inexperience is actually an advantage for Georgia because Notre Dame doesn't know what a Stockton-led offense looks like. I mean, that's partially true, but I would counter that by saying Stockton has to make his first career start going up against the best defensive coordinator in college football. If you don't think he's the best, he's certainly one of the best. So I give advantage Irish there. But there is some truth to the sentiment, though. Georgia's going to present some new looks that Notre Dame hasn't seen, and Notre Dame's going to have to adjust, but they can return the favor. They can confuse Stockton, and when they do that, it has to result in negative plays or turnovers because starting fast is always important, but it's essential for the Irish defense to make plays early to prevent Stockton from getting into any kind of a rhythm. If they force him to press, he's much more likely to make mistakes like he did against Texas when he threw that awful interception late in the game. So if they're able to do that, it could lead to turnovers, and turnovers on defense might be the best offense for Notre Dame in this game. Secondly, be the more physical unit. Georgia's going to get some yards on the ground at some point. It's just going to happen. Notre Dame doesn't have Riley Mills, but this is going to be a dogfight until the very end. And if the Notre Dame front can just stay in the fight and win at the point of attack more often than not, I think that they will be able to wear them down late in the game. Kirby Smart, the Georgia head coach, brought up the word physicality 7 times in his press conference as he was getting ready for the Notre Dame game. And the more physical team is going to win this game. Smart knows it. Freeman knows it. Both teams think that they are going to be the more physical unit. Whoever is right is going to win. There's no doubt about it. If Notre Dame could be the more physical group, specifically on this side of the ball, they're going to be in a great position to pull off the upset. All right, Notre Dame won the special teams battle against Indiana. It's a big reason why they were able to maintain such a comfortable lead. Will they be able to do the same against Georgia? That, plus some predictions coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Personally, I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score because it's a thrill. But not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown first in the game. the over-under, all the stuff that you normally would bet on, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. All right, I'm going to give a pick out today. I haven't really given out picks this week. I like Vikings plus 1.5 at home against the Packers. Home team getting points. What's better than that? Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. In a game that projects to be as close as this one, it ultimately could be decided on the margins, and I expect special teams to play a huge role in that respect. Georgia's got a solid special teams unit. Their kicker is a stud. Peyton Woodring has converted on 20 of 22 field goal attempts this year. He has been perfect under 50 yards, and he's 3 of 5 from deep. He is 3 of 5 from 50 plus with a long of 55, so he's accurate, and he's got a lot of strength in that leg. He also handles kickoff duties as well, and he's got such a boot that I think it's going to be a touchback pretty much every single time unless they dare Notre Dame to try and return it. But I expect minimal action for Notre Dame in the kick return game. But Georgia is going to be breaking in a new punter. This is critical because their starter suffered a knee injury in the SEC championship game when he was trying to make a tackle on a return, and this could be a chance for Notre Dame to make a big play on special teams. We know that the Irish have been extremely aggressive trying to block punts this year. They're tied for the lead of blocked field goals and punts in the country with 6 total on the year. They've blocked several punts already, and they've disrupted even more. And I would be surprised if they don't sell out early to try and rattle the new guy that Georgia drops back there. They're still figuring out who it's going to be. There's an open competition right now, but I expect Notre Dame to try to make life hell for whoever it is that gets the punting duties in this one. But maybe Georgia tries to counter that. Maybe they're a little bit more aggressive on 4th downs. Maybe they try a fake. We're going to have to wait and see. But that is going to be a very interesting matchup to keep an eye on. In their return game, Anthony Evans III handles kick and punt return duties for the most part. He's been a little bit more explosive as a punt returner, has a long of 46, but he hasn't really made much of an impact as a kick returner this year. On the Notre Dame side, their kicker, Mitch Jeter, knocked in 2 field goals against IU in a big spot. And that is a huge development for Notre Dame because he has struggled mightily ever since he got hurt before the Georgia Tech game this regular season. And it felt like he was obviously hurt. And then even when it looked like he was healthy, it looked like there was some mental block that was forcing him to miss kicks. So the fact that he was able to see to go through the uprights for the first time in months, I'm sure was a huge confidence boost for him. But I got to admit, the fact that his third and final attempt in that game got blocked did leave a sour taste in pretty much everyone's mouth because it wasn't even really close. It wasn't like Indiana just broke through and blocked it. It was such a low kick. It never really had any chance. So hopefully he's able to figure that out, tighten it up going up against Georgia because Notre Dame is going to need him. Georgia has blocked 1 field goal attempt already this year. They blocked one right before the end of the first half going up against Auburn, and Kirby Smart said blocking field goals is something that he really preaches to his team. They take a lot of pride in that, so they are going to be aggressive trying to block Mitch Jeter's kick. But I think the fact that he was able to convert a 49-yarder in those conditions is still a huge boost for him because he's not going to have to deal with those conditions when Notre Dame takes on Georgia. It's going to be very hard to score touchdowns in this game, so converting on any scoring opportunity that you get is going to be crucial, and Money Mitch is going to have to come up big again for the Irish. Punter, James Trindle, has improved as well, but he's going to have to be at his best in this game because field position is so important in a low-scoring game like we expect this one to be. But the best way for Notre Dame to make an impact on this game on special teams will be via the leg of Mitch Jeter and on punt block. They've been very aggressive on fake punts this year. I know that most recently, they had a reverse on a kickoff return, which I loved, but I think they might play it a little bit more conservative in the return game this week because Georgia's going to be ready for it. And whenever Notre Dame goes out there to punt, Georgia's going to be prepared for a fake. But I don't know. Marty Biaggi says he has endless tricks in the bag there, so maybe Notre Dame pulls out something for this game. Either way, we know that they're going to try and get after Georgia's punter, and Money Mitch is going to have to make an appearance in New Orleans. All right, let's get to some predictions. So this is it's really not been a very stressful season for Notre Dame fans since the loss to Northern Illinois. Like those first 2 weeks were a lot, but after that, it's been easy breezy, right? Notre Dame has won 11 straight games, 10 of which were by double digits, and the win over Indiana was about as stress-free as it possibly gets in a college football playoff game. But this is going to be different. I think it's going to be a lot different. I think it's going to be 60 minutes of smash mouth football with highs, lows, and everything in between. I could see Georgia winning. I could see Notre Dame winning. But the only thing that would surprise me is if it was a blowout in either direction. Every time these two teams have squared off, It's a low-scoring slugfest dating back to 1981, and I expect the same thing in this matchup. The over-under is low at 44.5 on FanDuel, and I think most people are still on the under. The under hit on Notre Dame IU, and I honestly expect the same in this game. I just don't see a world where either defense gives up a ton of points. Now, a pick six or maybe a big play on special teams could change that, but I went back and forth on this one. But ultimately, I like the Irish to win 17-16. I think Riley Leonard is going to make big plays when Notre Dame needs them. Mitch Cheater is going to connect on a critical field goal, and Jeremiah Love is going to get one more breakaway touchdown to put the Irish on top. I think a healthy Jeremiah Love is the best player on the field when Notre Dame's offense and Georgia's defense is on the field. When was the last time that Notre Dame had the best player on the field when they were going up against a team like this? I can't remember, okay? It's been a really, really long time. He had that 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana, and then after that, he was pretty much held in check. But he was also recovering from a knee injury that he suffered 3 weeks prior. He's had 10 to 11 more days of rest after that. He was also dealing with flu-like symptoms. So it's like, if that's what 75% Jeremiah Love looks like, imagine what 100% Jeremiah Love looks like. And I think he's going to be close to 100% in this game. I think he's going to have a big game. It's going to be tough sledding at times because, like I said, this Georgia defense is very stout against the run. But if you keep giving that guy opportunities, he's going to break one. He's done it every single game this season. He scored a rushing touchdown in every single game this season. And I think he's going to do the same against Georgia. He knows how big of an opportunity this is for him going up against a defense like this. He scored the game-winning touchdown against Texas A&M. I think he's going to have another huge touchdown in this game as well. And I really have a ton of confidence in Riley Leonard. I feel like I've become the biggest defender of him this season, but I think that he has improved so much and he's become a lot more consistent. Yes, he did have the early interception against Indiana. That was a tip ball. That can't happen against Georgia, no doubt about that. But I think after that play, he found his rhythm. He's making plays in the short and intermediate game, came up with some big throws on third down. It's a big reason why Notre Dame finished 7 of 13 on third down in that game. And I just think that with him in this game, a running quarterback, it's exactly what works going up against this Georgia defense. And I think Riley Leonard is a better thrower than Alabama's Jalen Milroe, even if Milroe is a little bit faster and a better runner. And I think that Riley Leonard is going to have a huge game in this one. And it's a chance for him to really stamp his legacy at Notre Dame, because ever since the Northern Illinois loss, a lot of fans turned on him and they've not been willing to turn back around. I get it. That was a terrible loss, embarrassing, and he's a big reason why that loss happened. But if he's able to come out and have a great game and knock off Georgia, people are going to start to change their minds. And people are going to start to change their minds about the Notre Dame football program if they're able to win this game. But don't get it twisted. This is going to be a very, very close game, and I think it's going to be able to go either way. I think it's going to look very similar to Notre Dame's win over Texas A&M. Ugly first half, lots of defense and field goals, but in the second half, the more physical team will break through. I believe it's going to be Notre Dame. Gunnar Stockton and the Georgia offense are definitely going to have their moments going up against this defense, but I think that they're going to have to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. Like I said, Woodring is a beast. He's going to knock in 3 field goal attempts this game, but that's not going to be enough. In the end, I like Adon Schuler, not Xavier Watts, because they're going to be watching him at all times. I think Adon Schuler comes up with a huge interception in this game, and that could seal it. This is going to be such a fun game. Like, I honestly cannot wait for it. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those games where I have like a sick feeling in my stomach throughout because it's going to be so nerve-wracking. But these are the games that we dream about. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but anything worth doing in life is meant to be hard. And if Notre Dame were to win this game, it would be the biggest win of my entire lifetime. And I'm 28 years old. I think you'd have to go all the way back to 1993 against Florida State for a win as big as this one, but that was a regular season game. This is the college football playoffs. This is the Georgia Bulldogs. It's the team at the top of the sport. It's prime time on New Year's Day. Like, what more can you ask for? To me, this is as good as it gets. All right, that's going to do it for me today. I'm going to be back early next week with more coverage of this matchup leading into New Year's Day. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I think the next episode is going to come out on Tuesday, but I'll update you on the social accounts if anything changes there. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm still not home. I'm still at my parents' house in Florida. My schedule has been so out of whack lately with the holidays and everything. So I apologize for the irregular schedule, but the best way to never miss an episode is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Also, if you enjoyed the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.